you for taking the time for doing this with me.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. If I may ask, where are you located?
I'm actually in Tennessee.
Oh, nice. Well, as you might know, I'm in Quebec, Canada.
Oh, okay, nice. A little more far north, but yeah, it's been crazy here weather-wise, but other than that, it's been nice.
Yeah, well, it's probably a tiny bit colder up in these parts, but I mean, I don't complain. We're used to the winter. It actually does influence our music quite a bit, I think, but different climate for sure.
For sure. I lived in Minnesota for a long time, so I'm kind of used to those frigid
Yeah.
temperatures.
Then you're familiar with Canadian temperature for sure.
For sure.
Nice.
So the first question that I ask everyone I interview, I just always like to kind of get us started on a good footing is how's everything going so far?
Everything's great. It's been a bit crazy, a bit hectic these past few weeks, but we're so excited. So we released a first single, Coffin, a couple months back, and the response was great. And then we released a second single, The Great Fire, just a few weeks ago. Again, great response. So right now we're in this cycle where we're planning shows. Our release is just a couple days from now on the 14th of June. We were very
Mhm.
excited. We're preparing for a great show in Boston with Unearthed. We're celebrating 20th anniversary of the oncoming storm. A bunch of bands, great lineup, and then we have a bunch of more local shows that are scheduled to celebrate the release of Penitence, our new album. So everything's been great. A bit busy, obviously, but we couldn't be happier.
Well, that's awesome. So how are you feeling now that the release date is only a few days away?
We're very excited. I mean, we can't wait to get this record out. So the songs that have been released as singles, they have a specific sound. I think, they're quite different. The first one, Coffin, is more of a death metal sounding song. It has a feature with Maddie Watkins from Year to Knife on it. It's a great song. It's my favorite actually on the album. The second one, Great Fire, which is it's actually the following track on the album. Is slower, a bit more atmospheric, whereas the rest of the album is, a bit of a mishmash of the sound that we've always had, which is a mix of hardcore and death metal with, a bit of some tones from black metal, darkened kind of tones. So I think it's a good balance between all those different genres. And yeah, we're very excited to, release this album. It's been a lot of work and it's been close to something like 7 years since we last released a full length, but we're quite excited.
Oh yeah. What happened kind of why it took so long for you to release another one?
Well, we did release an EP 3 years ago, well, 2 years ago actually. That was 2022. We recorded it during the pandemic. So the pandemic obviously slowed us down. Perhaps we were going to do an album during that period, but it turned out to be an EP, which we're super happy with. But yeah, so Lightless, which is the first LP that was released in 2017, and then just played a bunch of shows. There were some lineup changes, which tend to slow things down quite a bit. So what we did during the pandemic was this EP. It's a four-song EP, and then that just gave us just a quick jump start to start writing more songs and now to release this album, Penitence. So yeah, 7 years is a long time, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad we did an EP in between. It's just enough so that you release something, but we're super happy to release an album. And actually we just can't wait to go up, to Jam Space and write some more music, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So from the start of kind of like the first idea of the album to finish, how long did that take?
That's a good question. So I think we started jamming new tracks that would be towards maybe mid or end of 2022. So that's already quite a way back. And then it took us 6, 8, 10 months to write the songs. So we're a six-piece and we're all involved in the music writing process at some level. I mean, our guitarist Patrick writes a lot of riffs and then we generally use those riffs and we rework the all around it. And sometimes they'll have like an almost complete song and then we'll just trash that and just we'll redo it. It can be frustrating at times. But yeah, so during that roughly 10 months process, we wrote something like maybe I don't know, like 12, 14 songs or here and there, and then finalized it all and went to the recording studio in April and May of last year in 2023. So I don't know if people know this, but there's usually quite a good delay between the moment where you hit up the studio and when it's actually released. We changed record labels as well, so we were with Translation Lost for the EP in 2022, and now we've moved over to Secret Swarm for this one. So there is also this process of finding a new home for the band and trying to find a good fit for us, and we couldn't be happier actually. So it's a lengthy process, but every step is important. Every step is worth it, I think.
Wow, sounds like you guys went through a lot in that 7 years.
Yeah, indeed. And the pandemic period was very special. So I don't know how the lockdown was in the area where you lived, but here in Canada and Quebec, the lockdown was very drastic, so we had a curfew, and we actually needed special permission to be allowed to go and jam, and rehearse our songs and for the recording and all. So that certainly slowed it down. And at the same time, you were just walking the streets, everything was empty, everything was closed. It was really dreadful, but at the same time, it was inspiring, for the music that we were writing and even for the lyrics. It was a really special time. So it did slow things down, but yeah, like you said, a lot happened, in those 7 years. But we're there, we're back, and we're now six piece. It used to be two guitars, and now it's three. It's been like this. We've had this lineup for 4 years now, and yeah, it's we're super stoked.
Well, that's awesome. So I know you said it's kind of been a while and you've had, a little bit of time to record this album, but is there anything that you would change about it?
Oh, that's a good question. So, uh, like most bands, I think we're quite critical of the stuff we put out, but I will say that for this album, we're really happy with the results. So, I mean, would we change anything? Probably we'd change like a riff here and there, maybe this part. But at the same time, if you want to change things all the time, you'll never release anything. You need to commit and say, okay, this is good enough. We're happy with this. We've put enough time, on this or that song, and we need to release it. And to like I said, we listen to the tracks, quite frequently, and we're happy with the results. If it were up to me, if I could, have like a magic wand and change something, maybe I would change a thing or two. But to be honest, I think it's a solid record, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
For sure. So I know you talked about having, you used to be like a two guitars and now you've changed that to three. How
Yeah.
do you think that kind of changed the dynamic of the band itself?
Well, first of all, the guy who joined, Louis, is a really good friend. So, in terms of the dynamics, between the members, it was not that it was bad before, because the whole band, we're all good friends. But bringing Louis along was really good in that regard because he's just a great guy. So that's for us. Actually, it's the most important aspect. We're a bunch of friends. We like to have fun. We like to play shows. We like to write music, and bringing Louis along was very much part of that, and also, so in terms of writing and playing music, I think that bringing a third guitar, which is quite unusual, not that many bands do that, for
Mhm.
good reasons, because it can get quite chaotic in terms of playing live and whatnot. But what it does do is that it adds this extra layer, of whatever you want to do with it. It can be an extra rhythm section, it can be melodies, or something that's more atmospheric, which is a considerable part of what we're trying to write as music now. We try to
Mhm.
involve a bit more atmospheric tones and just really make the most out of this extra layer of the guitars that we have. So I play drums, but I also do sound design, and I integrate some of those sounds into the songs as well. So we've got those two kind of extra layers that we use to enhance our music. It's kind of I always compare it to adding, extra seasoning on your food. It's just it can be subtle, but at the same time it can change a lot. So having this, an extra guitar player, while it can be seen as a risk in terms of, is it all going to blend together? Is it going to be mushy? But in the end, it really works well for us. Even if that, for example, if you have a very heavy riff, like a mosh part, having that third guitar playing that same very rhythmic, riff, it just adds to it. It's like a wall of sound kind of thing. So we really
Mhm.
enjoy that. So all in all, we think it's a great decision, and we couldn't be happier with hiring this guy in particular. He's just the greatest, and yeah, we have a really good dynamic going on, and we just love it.
Well, that's awesome because I know sometimes when you're friends in a group, either you become better friends or you become not so good friends anymore.
Yeah, well, we it's like a family, there are ups and downs for sure, and we butt heads, sometimes, but I think key to making it work is just communicating properly, and just not just keeping things inside. You just need to, vent it out in a way that's, diplomatic, and that's honest, and that's caring. And when you do that, it just works. Everything works itself out in the end.
Yeah, for sure. I know I was doing a metal interview, but that's like some relationship advice too and it works for everything.
Indeed. Interesting. Yep.
So what was the biggest challenge of this album?
It's a good one. So, well, first of all, one thing that's been a challenge for Apes in general is that we write music that caters to so many different genres. So we draw heavily from hardcore, which is our roots essentially. But at the same time, we've always been, listeners of death metal and every extreme genre of metal. So blending those two genres together can be a challenge. And then we wanted to add, as I said earlier, more darkened kind of tones. So you want to make sure that you strike a balance between these different styles of extreme music, and it needs to be coherent. It needs to be relevant. I mean, we write our music for ourselves first and foremost, but at the same time, you want to make sure that, the listeners actually get what you're doing, and striking that balance. And also we have our personal preferences. Some members like the hardcore stuff a bit more and would prefer having maybe more, mosh parts or whatever. And some of us would prefer doing more like the death metal blast beat kind of thing. So I think the ultimate challenge was when we were writing the songs was really finding a balance between all these different sounds. And you add on top of that the fact that I myself and Alexander, our singer, very much we like industrial music. We like noise music, drone music, and we wanted to add, bits of that here and there, in the songs, and doing interludes in between. So it can get a bit complicated. So I think that was the main challenge, but I think we did things correctly. I think it just clicked. Um, Obviously, some riffs didn't make it into the song. Some songs were just rejected in the end, and maybe we'll reuse them, maybe we won't. But in the end, it's a matter of, choosing which songs are relevant to what you want to release at that very moment, and what makes sense for people to listen to. So yeah, we've always been known for blending, many different styles of extreme music, and it's always a challenge to try to please ourselves while writing it, and but also please people who are listening to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely want to like it yourself, but you hope other people like it too.
Exactly. And I mean, one advantage that we have in doing all this blending of genres is that we could easily fit as well. We could play a hardcore show or a metal show or death metal show, whatever. We can fit many different types of bills. So that's one thing I think which is an advantage to, when you have the kind of sound that we have.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely opens up some possibilities
It
too for
does.
different bands you can play with.
Yeah.
So, was there anything that surprised you about this album?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think when when we listen to the final version of the album as a whole, once we decided what would be the order of the tracks and everything, we actually realized that the album was a bit more melodic or atmospheric than what we initially thought. And curiously enough, that wasn't something we were, specifically aiming for. It just came out naturally. So adding, layers of guitar leads that might sound a bit more like black metal or a bit more atmospheric, and just throwing some of that here and there. It wasn't until we listened to the final result that we realized, oh, I mean, we usually try to write songs that are very heavy, and then we realize, oh, look, there's a lot of atmospheric parts to this album, and turns out we just love it. So that was certainly a surprise for us. Um, but at the same time, we always challenge ourselves. We always try to write, when composing new stuff, we always try to think outside the box a little bit. So maybe when we start writing, new songs for some upcoming new album, maybe we'll go in a different direction. You don't know. But one thing's for sure, we were a bit surprised by, the final result. It was certainly a bit more, like I said, atmospheric or melodic than we thought initially, at least. But we're quite happy with it.
Well, that's awesome. Is that kind of what fans can expect to hear on the whole album?
Well, it's a good question because yeah, we're known for, the band is named Apes. After all, we're known for doing very heavy stuff, like very heavy mush parts and having that kind of hardcore death metal blend. Uh, and I mean, the singles that we released, so Coffin is certainly it's a full-on, death hardcore song. The second single, The Great Fire, is the second single sounds a bit more like the rest of the album, I'll say. Not in terms of speed, because that one's slower, but in terms of integrated these three layers of the guitars and the melodies and the atmosphere and the samplers. I think that one sounds a bit more like the rest of the album. I think some of the listeners who know our previous stuff will be a bit surprised, but hopefully in a good way. It
Mhm.
certainly does not depart, radically from what we've done before, but it does. There's a bit of novelty there for sure.
Well, that's awesome. I think people are going to be really excited when they hear it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I have to ask, where did the album name come from?
All right. So first of all, I'm not the specialist. I'm not the one who writes the lyrics, but I do know, some of the lore behind it. So our singer Alexander is the mastermind, not only behind the lyrics, but behind the visual concepts as well. He's a graphic designer. He designed the artwork for the album as well as the previous releases. He works with tons of bands as a graphic designer, and the concept of penitence, I think it's like a two-pronged thing. So if in a self-reflective way, it's about, kind of punishing yourself for maybe some things that you've done wrong. Maybe you've wronged people. Maybe you've been selfish, and you need to repent, for the bad things you're not, hopefully not very bad things, but still, I think we all need to, look at ourselves in the mirror and reflect a little bit about maybe how we can, overcome some of our personal challenges and maybe become a better person. But obviously, we twisted that into something that's very dark and gritty in terms of lyrics and visual style. And the second prong is about, punishing the bad people around you, not in a literal way, but inviting people to have that same reflection about themselves. And we have a pretty dark outlook, on this world that we live in. Sadly, there are some great things about life and everything, but in terms of what the lyrics are, it's pretty grim, it's pretty dreadful, and it's all about and like I said, you know, uh, inviting people to punish themselves because we're doing some very weird things as humans and as a society. And it's the lyrics for the music as well are like are more or less an outlet for these negative kind of feelings that we have, which in the end is a positive thing to do. I mean, some people, I don't know, they do boxing, they do fighting sports, they play sports, they make art, and that's what we do. We make art as an outlet for these negative feelings that we have. So the concept of penitence really revolves around that, around, just letting all the negative out. So, and that really shines through not only the lyrics, but the kind of music that we make. And that's probably the same can probably said about a lot of bands that put out extreme music.
For sure. That's really deep. I think that is great, especially I don't know, whenever you're in a bad mood or I don't know, like metal just makes you feel so much better. Like it's dark, it's, rough, and I'm like, this makes me feel better.
Yeah, for some reason, there's a paradox there for sure. Like, why does really dark stuff like, extreme metal music, the lyrics, the cover art, sometimes they're just gruesome. Like, I remember my parents telling me, like, what are you putting yourself through this? Like, this is disgusting. I was like, you don't get it. It's just for me, it's actually a positive thing, which I can't really explain. But once you get into it and it just clicks and it works, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. But I guess you need to be involved in it to understand that, or maybe to, I don't know. It's like it's a weird subculture, and it's a bit controversial, but there's a definitive positive aspect to all of this.
For sure. I'm glad you understand.
I think I do.
So I have to ask, just out of curiosity, have you ever thought about as a band putting like some light things mixed in with some darkness? I know we talked about it being, really dark and stuff, but
Do you mean in terms of music or in terms of lyrics?
both.
Well, I mean, we've considered it before. There are some bands out there who have changed their sound, who or maybe have integrated, lighter lighter stuff into what they're doing. And I, for one, am all for it. I will say that so far we've focused on writing like very aggressive, very dark stuff, but we certainly like to keep an open mind. For example, so our native language, all of the members, we speak French. We sing in English, obviously, but because it's the more natural language for us to release our music. But we've considered releasing some of our songs in French, and perhaps the themes would be lighter. So we're certainly not, we're certainly open to that idea. We haven't done it yet, but why not? If a band like Deaf Heaven comes to mind when I think of bands that have integrated a lighter kind of sound to their music, and I really enjoyed those last few albums that they've put out. And it's
Mhm.
sometimes it almost sound popish, a little bit, not quite, but it's certainly different from what they released initially. And I really enjoy those albums, so why not do it? We might do it in the future. Why not?
That sounds really interesting. Maybe an idea for the next album.
Absolutely. I think what we'll try to do in the coming months is maybe write some new stuff. Maybe we'd like to do like a concept, maybe do like an EP that has a super long song on one side and maybe like two shorter songs on the other side, something like that. So perhaps we could integrate some of that, light stuff in one of those songs. I I say why not?
For sure. So I know we talked about your favorite song earlier in the interview, but what was the most difficult song to write on the album?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the hardest one we wrote was that second single, "The Great Fire," uh, because well, the song is slower. It goes at a slower pace. It's a bit longer than the other tracks, and for us, writing slower, longer songs is not our natural state. We push ourselves to do it, and but the thing is, for us at least, it's quite easy to write, very fast riffs and blast beats and so on. But to take the time to write a slower song that has layers and layers of guitars, and that it needs, since it's slower, it feels to me like you need to put more care into those riffs that you're writing. And
Mhm.
not to disclose too much, but I will say that when we were writing that song, we went through a bit of challenge, between members of the band. There was this weird energy about when we wrote it, and the creative, output of that is the song that you can hear. And we went to this. It was a weird couple of days. I remember when we were writing that song, when we were jamming it, and for some reason it came out the way it is, and we're super happy about it. And the way it is on the album is that uh, you you can't hear it, you can't hear it right now because we released both singles separately. But on the album, when it releases, you can see that so Coffin segues into the Great Fire with a sample that I've recorded. It's my voice going through a bunch of pedals, and the sample keeps playing at the beginning of the song, and we really dig that, like this extra layer of sound. But when that sample wasn't there, something felt a bit empty, and now that we added a sample, it just makes the song more complete to us. So yeah, I would say that was the more challenging one, but at the same time, it's always a good time. We really have fun, and we really enjoy writing music together. So all in all, it was just maybe that one was a bit more challenging, but overall, it was just a great process.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So now that the album releases in a few days, what's next for the band?
So as I said earlier, we're playing this show in Boston on the 15th, with On Earth and a bunch of cool bands, Bleeding Through, All at War. It's just for us, it's a crazy lineup because we've been listening to those bands forever, since we were
Mhm.
kids. We're all in our mid to late 30s, and all this lineup is just so sick. So that's one show we're playing, and then we're playing a string of local shows around the release, to celebrate the release of Penitence. So we're doing a bunch of shows in Quebec City and Montreal, and we're playing a couple shows. So that'll be like 7, 8 shows around Canada, and then we're playing Eastern Canada, the Maritimes, in September with a bunch of great bands as well. So that's for now, and we're trying to plan a tour of the U.S. sometime, probably maybe next winter or something like that. We now have our visa; we can cross the borders easily. European tour would be great as well. So we're on the lookout for that. Trying to identify opportunities for touring a bit more. We all
Mhm.
have we all have day jobs. I mean, it's not like we can all go and tour for a month or something, but we would certainly love to at least do a couple weeks here and there for sure.
Well, that's awesome. Hopefully you get that all squared away so you can share your music with some more people.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I do have one last question here for you. Is there any message you'd like to give to your old fans, new fans, anyone interested in purchasing the album?
Absolutely. So I will say this. So for those who know us, who know our previous, music, you will not be disappointed. I think you're going to love this new album. And for people who don't know us, well, go and listen to the singles, go and listen to the album. It's out there on our Bandcamp. So it's apqc.bandcamp.com. Um, I mean, it's a blend of hardcore, death metal, darkened tones, a bit of black metal in there. It's just extreme music. It caters to so many different crowds, I think. So go and listen to it. You will not be disappointed. I think it'll be a good album, and we're just a bunch of great dudes. Just support us. We'd like it.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time for doing this interview. And for anyone who's interested, Penitence does come out on the 14th from Secret Swarm Records, and you can also find them on Bandcamp.
Thank you so much, Alex, for having me. This was a pleasure.